It's the final countdown. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Yeah, just a few days. Crazy craze. So I've got a really long one for you today. So buckle in. Buckle up. Grab some snacks. Been working on it all day, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to bring it to you and sort of placed myself in front of this for a reason and also dressed myself thusly. I was trying to figure out where should I do this one. And this is a painting of me, a portrait of me that they use at a drawing school. And the reason I think it's so cool is they use this as a format, a teaching format. So, like, hundreds of students have done this exact same pose, but this was the instructor's. So he gave it to me because it was one of the better ones. So this same face has been done again and again, and I just liked that he put a pink heart there in the middle. So I did pink and black to kind of reflect that. And I have shown it before, but it's a little bit more related to this one I'm about to give you. Now the old challenge of getting it straight. Fabulous. And I've shown you this one before. I adore it. I got it for my 30th birthday gift to myself, and it's the woman being fed energy from the cosmos, pouring it onto the blank canvas. So I think that's kind of related as well. I could talk about this one for days and days, this particular subject. It's been a really rough day today, actually. I was already almost halfway through this one, and so I continued to run with it. I almost stopped and switched topics because I found out that a friend I worked with for years passed away. And my heart hurts. I don't know what to say. It's a really bad feeling all day long. And reconnecting with people I haven't spoken to. I turned away from a job I'd had for many, many years in the pandemic, and then just sort of felt I needed to steer a different direction, and have done some heavy reflection. And this was somebody who stood up for me and made me laugh. And I don't know, just rattled. I'm really rattled by it, and I just didn't have the capacity to totally switch that part of my brain and write about that, and I wanted to, but it was almost just kind of like too new and painful and weird and unexpected. So I just reflected on this role that I was already on. But it has to do with the heart, and so that's all. It's all connected, right? Everything is. So, geez, yeah, it's just been a bit of a heavy day. So, hey, here we are, though. We're here together. So, I found these pretty easily in my basement, and the poem I'm going to be giving you. Oh, I also wore my multicolored rainbow heart here, so it'll all be clear momentarily. But I've always said I have certain abilities, certain agilities of my soul, and perusing deeper layers of existence. But I've always had this deep resistance to monetizing that, because people have said, like, why don't you charge for it? It's kind of like my art. All the art I've done, I've given away, and then I always kick myself, and I'm like, hey, wait, I'm broke. I should be selling this. But it just always seems to suddenly grow this meaning that becomes attached to a certain person, and I end up giving it away. So I feel that way about my extrasensory perceptive abilities that or I feel that way about most things, honestly, that once a dollar amount is attached to it, it sort of loses some potency. Anyway, there was a time, I'm very terrified to even admit how long ago. I'm gonna go ahead and maybe say, ooh, it hurts my heart. 11 years ago. Ah! And I made these posters when my mom still had her shop. So I made this beautiful one, this one on the back as well. Use the same sort of angel image with these cool gold accoutrements, gold accessories. So I worked really hard on these posters. Got not one client, not one person, because it's not. I completely invented this. I found it. I discovered it. It doesn't exist anywhere else, and so no one knew what to make of it. It wasn't just like psychic readings or I'm gonna read your palm. This is palmistry. It wasn't tarot card reading, something that people have come to understand in that other realm of other veils. So, to no avail. There was nobody bit. No one took the bait. But I said, special offer for February. And then there was one that said, special offer for January. Get to know a new side of your heart during the month of love. Heart character readings by Teal. A unique, intuitive experience you won't find anywhere else. And that's true. It is singular to me. Great for personal reflection or as a gift for your sweetie. Now through mid-March. 30 minutes for $25. 1 hour for $45. Which I think is a great deal. Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I think I just gave my phone number away. But nope, it's the phone number of the shop, which doesn't exist anymore. So don't call it. It's not a thing anymore. Anyway, so people didn't know what to make of it. And that's fine. Sometimes people don't know what to make of me, and it's okay. Sometimes I don't know what to make of me. But I'm going to explain heart characters to you presently, thusly, right now, while you're with me. So I just gotta dive in, because it's a long one. Oh, my heart has fallen. I knew it wasn't attached very well. Symbolic? I'm not sure. But we'll just get her back on there. Always these dainty little things that you're supposed to be able to do with your fingers that are just so, gotta be so nimble. Okay, so the heart, it's a symbol. This is where it starts. Hence the name of the poem. It starts with listening to a heart. Here we go. I rested my ear upon 100 chests or more, and did my best exploring divination. Each one was an invitation to a world I only wished I had the gift to make up. Some still take up so much space in my mind. It's a skill that's extremely difficult to explain or define, because it was all mine. It didn't come from a book or a zine or another time or from scrolling online. No one really did that yet, so we better harnessed our minds. Most all my friends were brilliant musicians with perplexing personalities that shifted paradigms. Stars aligned better in those days. No one had their face buried in an Instagram page. We engaged face to face and tasted the first sips of newly written songs until the dawn approached. Our energies were not encroached upon by deep fakes and take online scrolling and the unfolding of a downfall that equated to a glue trap of the soul, like ego flypaper. I'd wager we'd have laughed at a forecast of what was to come. I guess they call that youth wasted on the young. We sung to one another instead of covering empty ground online, finding only numb outcomes. None of us had self-inflicted arthritic thumbs. We had fun without machines. We had more glorious dreams. We were a team. I was a part of each and every scene of it, not passively clicking like, but partaking in the curiosity, velocity, spike that was life then. I knew precisely who my friends were. I was sure of so much that I've now lost touch with. And I had a gift that was celebrated and that generated an even deeper accessibility of my strange skill. First I let it trickle, and then I let it spill, and fulfilled many a heart. That's how it starts, by listening to a heart. I mean, really listening. And for a long time, the intuition was at first hard to assign a name to. An entire life came into view after a heated argument between my acting school roommate and I. I was ruminating so ferociously that I'll admit I was taking it out on myself quite atrociously. I was repeatedly sticking a pushpin into my thigh as I cried uncontrollably. Hollywood has a way of making it so you don't know what to say, and your brain acts on animal instinct because it's so cloudy it can't think. I was sinking so low in our closet, afraid to show how raw this disagreement had hit me. She, of course, made the discovery and lifted me from my crumpled state. Being disconnected from her, of all people, was something too painful to even contemplate. It was so late at night, and she set things right by telling me to just lay on her chest and listen to her heart. The uncertainty and lack of ability to articulate my feelings was tearing me apart. I rested my head on her buttery skin and didn't realize at that moment a whole movement was about to begin. I saw a man's face with a troublemaker grin. I saw his entire life spin like a film reel, and I could feel his every thought. A hypnotic trance pinned me to that spot for an hour or more. At first I was just crying, trying to restore some order between my dearest confidant in LA. I didn't expect this entire story to play out as I listened to a person inside her heart spout thoughts and memories to me. He was bald and called women bitches. He was muscular and came across as vicious. He was covered in tattoos, a misogynist and racist to boot. A very unlikable guy in combat boots. There was oil and grease beneath his fingernails. He was always going off the rails, yelling at guys he worked with. He had a gift for building and fixing things. He wore skull rings and leather. But behind closed doors, he wrote beautiful letters in calligraphy and watched deeply romantic black and white movies. He cuddled his miniature dog and logged all of his dreams. He was not internally who he seemed to be. I told my roommate this whole inexplicable story, and with her mouth agape, she informed me that I was describing almost to a T someone she'd been in love with in high school. A fool to many, who outwardly projected meanness and racist tendencies, who shaved his head and acted out of cruelty. But he fell in love with her, a black woman, and a strong one at that. I didn't even know how to react at the similarities between this person I had never heard of and this whole story that had been revealed to me. And this is when we very magically created the heart character concept. I wasn't adept at explaining it until I performed more such explorations, or chest content communications, and started to develop an idea of what I thought these internal beings actually were. They were far from the most intense interactions. Chest content communications, and started to develop an idea of what I thought these internal beings actually are. These were by far the most intense interactions I've ever had with people, unequal even to sexual encounters. It's a blur now, really, how the activity of reading hearts started to become such a regular part of my reality. But before I knew it, everyone I knew was after me to have their heart character read. Each one led me to more and more, and at this point, I'm not even sure how many people I unfortunately had to put on the wait list. It was an extremely draining process, I must admit. I would sit with the person for a half hour or so before I even dove in on the chest messages. It depresses me still that I couldn't get to everyone. And now laying on people's chests isn't really something that's done without fear. With some people, I would hear the whole entire story, told to me orally, simply through the heartbeat. With others, it would take an hour just for the character to greet me and let me in. There were times when I was swimming in someone's entire life history for what seemed like eternity, and in actuality, only 10 minutes had gone by. With some friends and new acquaintances, I didn't even have to try, and the whole character was revealed to my closed eyes. And with others, it was as though their heart character was trying to hide, and I had to get them to trust me. Eventually, I decided that what a heart character represents, which wasn't evident at first, but once it made sense, I could confidently assert that this person hiding behind the curtain of everyone's heartbeat was the past life that most intensely impacted the current human form. It's certainly outside the norm of logical understanding, but these whole lives were demanding that I hear them and see them and send the messages they delivered to whoever they were living inside of. Some spoke love, others spoke warnings. Some trusted me immediately, others took time warming to me. The majority of the heart characters were the opposite sex of the person they lived in and existed within the past. There were, however, a few exceptions that amassed a deeper curiosity in me because they existed currently and simultaneously on the planet. This demanded more investigation, but I figured it out in what I can only call a pretty certain fashion. The ones who were alive in the present came through with such passion, and I theorized that these more rare heart characters represented a soul essence that had been split into two or more people. That one recycled soul could inhabit multiple beings, and the stories I was seeing were assurances of the circle completing, by feeding me clues about a living person coming through who shared soul stuff with the particular chest I was listening to. I know it's complicated, and many people have the point of view that I just made it all up for the heck of it. I only wish my creativity was so impressive. I guess it's irrelevant at this point who believes and who doesn't, because there's really no way to test it. Although the living heart character theory was proven to me rather miraculously. It's a story even I have trouble believing to this day. It's my best story. It sounds like a movie or an elaborate play, but it wasn't. It all happened just this way. I had a brilliant array of musician friends, and I was lucky enough to observe and sway to their beautiful music for years. We shared stories and adventures and laughter and tears. The sheer intensity of this time frame was honestly insanely beautiful. No one had their energy pulled on by Instagram. There was no such damn thing. A few of the bands got together to jam and sing in this beautiful temple in Denver. I don't remember exactly what denomination the church was, but we were welcomed there with honor and love. It was a huge spherical building with a massive glass ceiling with a massive glass ceiling we were somehow allowed to walk to the top of. And rather dangerously, I'm sure, many of my friends would walk on literal 2x4s across this epic expanse. It was several bands brought together to create and dance. It was several bands brought together to create and dance into the late evenings. I wrote lady evenings. I do like that, but it's late evenings. Lady evenings. To dance and create into the late evenings. I have trouble now even believing that we were allowed access to such wonder. There was 20 or more of us in this percussive, wondrous music with thunder through the dome structure. All of this creativity seemed so pure and not in any way driven by fame or followers. That hollow counting of likes had no place there. No one cared about hashtags because they weren't a thing yet. When I would go to these rehearsals, I was met by such care and enthusiasm that was beyond compare. We shared and dared to be vulnerable in ways I haven't felt in so long. I felt that I belonged there. On one of many lovely days of connection and musical praise, the air seemed to guide my way to whose heart I was meant to read. We were literally in a giant spiritual library full of the most beautiful old books I will probably ever be lucky enough to see. I asked this person who my internal radar was pointing to, and she was happy to be selected to have her heart read. At this point, the reputation of my readings preceded me, and little needed to be said. She laid on the floor of the library, and I rested my head on her chest softly. Twinkling golden light poured in majestically through the stained glass windows, creating a halo glow around her. I've never been so instantly sure of someone's heart character before. I dove in for an hour or more. It took me a while to restore my balance as I stood up from the deep dive. Hers was a rare one, still alive out there somewhere. He had flaming red hair matted into one giant dreadlock. Sort of a shock to see, really. Almost like a sculpture moving freely, like a whole other entity separately from his body. It was impossible not to spot him in a crowd. He was extremely tall, but bent over, and not at all proud of who he was. He heard a constant buzzing in his ears, which drove him crazy. He didn't like being around people, so others called him lazy. Sometimes the heart character's facial features were hazy, but not this. But not his. I could see the outline of his face perfectly, though he hung his head to keep it hid. He had hated living in the suburbs since he was a kid, and felt that he came from an alien society. He didn't think very highly of most people, and had few friends. He liked to pretend that the aliens were looking for him and would find him any day. He had a strange way of moving, half floating, half scooting. His one massive dreadlock protruding above everyone else. He felt other people's feelings, but never knew how to describe it because no one asked. He had trouble with simple tasks and hated school. He wasn't drawn to anything that other people found to be cool. So he made up his own rules. He was very pale and never got into a pool or even wore shorts. He gravitated to other oddball sorts and certainly never played any traditional sports. He was, however, a yo-yo expert, which he explained to me with that phrase specifically. He was generally upbeat, though he often dragged his very large feet when asked to complete menial human expectations. He liked to go on long walks of contemplation, but even his walks were rather different. He spent years training himself to walk backwards perfectly. People would stare to see it. He'd wander through the suburbs backwards and refuse to be defeated by normalcy. A strange detail that he let me see was that he had only been intimate with one woman, a married neighbor in her 40s. He was ashamed, but didn't blame himself or her. It happened so fast that it was a blur, and he never ever told a soul. Whether it was cold or 100 degrees out, he only ever wore a green or black trench coat, mismatched socks, and clunky boots or Converse shoes. He didn't understand social cues and didn't necessarily want to. People called him weird, but he was true to himself. He had a whole shelf full of yo-yos and took one with him any time he felt brave enough to go anywhere. His fire-red hair led me to name him the Fiery Ginger. His whole personality lingered with me, especially because only a year or so later, we would meet. I know it's hard to believe, but it happened. I can only say I wasn't emotionally fastened in tight enough to have such a mind-blowing affirmation show up out of nowhere, with flaming red hair matted into one giant dreadlock. When he walked up to me, my knees quite literally knocked together. What a feather for my intuitive cap. I was totally taken aback. I had packed hastily to go meet my friends in the desert on their tour. I was sure the guy I was going for was going to end things with me after asking me to come, and he did. So I was hurt, but not stunned. I tried to have fun, though my heart was broken. I did open myself to several heart character readings on that unusual adventure. I was depressed, but centered. We traveled through New Mexico and Arizona, and at this point, we were in Prescott at a Food Not Bombs, sleeping on the floor. The kindness of the people we met restored some of my vitality. My spark was coming back to me. We were vastly unprepared, thinking that in the desert the weather would be fair, but it rather suddenly became too cold to bear. The other cool revolutionary youths living there magically had all these spare coats. They gave us food and furs and lots of hope. I was sleeping on the wood floor wearing this gorgeous 1960s Penny Lane jacket when I heard very excited racket coming towards me. "Teal! Teal!" someone screeched. "Teal, wake up!" I sat up groggily. A small group of peeps pulled me to my feet. "What's going on?" I mumbled tiredly. Come on, you gotta come outside." Immediately. "There's somebody you have just got to meet." I was not even awake enough to form complete sentences when I saw an extremely tall head of blazing red hair bobbing past the fence. I suddenly became tense. Could this actually be who I instantly thought it was? My entire body started to buzz. He floated towards me. I was already certain it was him. He seemed awkward, so I decided to begin the introduction. "So," I said, "I'm Teal. These guys have revealed who I think you are?" I asked. Not sure how far they had gotten in the bizarre explanation with him. He grinned strangely. "Yes," he said, "I have an inkling as to who you think I am." He didn't stand up straight, but I could tell right away he was well over 6 feet tall. We quickly let our walls down, and I felt a profound sense of wonder, because I didn't even have to dig to uncover his identity. The immensity of the coincidences was already too great just looking at him. I could feel my own heart palpitate. I tried to talk slow, even though I couldn't wait to know everything. "So," I said, standing a little closer now, "is it okay if I ask you some questions?" His nervousness lessened. "Yes," he said. "I'll tell you anything you care to know." "Okay, well," we got into this serendipitous flow. "All of these may sound odd," he stopped me. "Odd is the way I lean in all things. Life is a dream." Continue. "Yes," I smiled. "Well, where did you grow up?" He kicked up a little dust. "I was raised in a very strange and uninhabitable land they call the suburbs. The absurd, planned stagnation of all human energy. The dullest place you can be. Aliens dropped me there." "Fair enough," I said. "I can relate to that." I couldn't help but stare at the single clumped mat of his intensely red hair. He read my thoughts. "My appearance is said to be a lot for people to take in," he smiled. All the while, friends were starting to gather near us, trying to hear this amazing meeting of energies. The very heart that I found him in was sitting not far from me, watching intently. "Well, here's another wild question," I said, but he was evidently ready for anything. My other friends hadn't talked to him much. They only saw him and went flush in their cheeks, unable to speak, merely explaining that there was a girl at the free school who he needed to come talk to, that he was a person she'd seen inside one of our friends' hearts. He started towards the building without need of further explanation and nodded as though he started his day with the expectation that this was coming. You don't just go running into heart characters every day, but he embraced the idea without hesitation. "So," I asked, "are you fond of long stretches of quiet contemplation, and do you by any chance partake in these while walking backwards?" His eyes lit up, and a glimmer stirred within him. "Well, in my opinion," he replied eagerly, "that's the only way to think properly. Me and my pal Jonesy, we're planning on walking backwards across the whole country soon. I've been walking backwards for many, many moons now. How'd you know that? Well, I guess I don't have to ask. You're in tune, right? You see deeper?" I nodded. "Yes, indeed." "Well, wow. I already know that you're this person I've seen in my friend's chest, but I'll ask you the rest anyway," I said. "So, do you by any chance like to yo-yo?" He glowed and pulled a yo-yo right out of his pocket. His green trench coat pocket, I might add. "I'm so glad you asked," he said. "I am a yo-yo expert." This was beyond berserk. That's exactly how this character explained his quirky talent to me from inside my friend's chest cavity. A yo-yo expert. Specifically. "Want me to do a trick?" he said, flicking the thing so quick with his wrist it was truly like magic. "Of course," I said, tears of amazement streaming down my face. "I came in first place in a talent show with this one. I was young. I've only gotten better since then." Reality was bending around me. How was this happening? He did an amazing trick and smiled like a proud child. This was way too wild. "Do you always wear that coat?" I asked. "No," he said, surprising me a bit. "I also have a black one." I was stunned, completely. It was almost like he'd been waiting to meet me. Well, this next question, I stalled. I don't really know how to ask it discreetly. Hit me with it. He seemed to brace himself emotionally. Well, did you ever, sleep with an older neighbor, perhaps? His face looked like I slapped him. No, I didn't, he said. No, repeating himself many, many times. I'm sorry, I said. Oh, it's fine, he said, winding up his yo-yo. Well, I guess I was mostly right, but that's okay. Yeah, but I'll still play, he said. Ask me some more. Okay, sure, I took a breath. Well, here's a big one. What's your name, friend? Ginger, he replied. This was such a crazy ride. What? I laughed. Really? I called him the Fiery Ginger. The first ever Heart character was the Tinker. They all had names like that. I read my own through an intense ceremony in the bathtub, and he was dubbed the Bricklayer. I swear, crazy things happen to me all the time, but this was dizzying my mind. Your name is Ginger? I stammered. This was his exact answer, word for word. Well, he said, I had a real name once, a series of letters made up by stunted humans, but that name never mattered to me. Everyone who knows me, really knows me, just calls me Ginger. So that's what you can call me. I about fell to my knees. How was this possibly happening? Before I could even start wrapping my head around this, he had agreed to let me read his chest on a nearby gazebo. I didn't even know what time it was. I hadn't eaten anything. But fate doesn't often bring such miracles. So I pulled up some energy reserve, knowing it would be a swervy ride inside Ginger's chest. It was, of course, much more intense than all the rest. His character was no longer living. A generous and giving man with a twisted hand and a dark shadow that followed him. When he was quite young, he developed alopecia and went bald. He was called mean names as a child, even by his parents. He was abused, which was apparent just glancing at him. I couldn't just skim this one, even though it wasn't too fun to dive in. His parents were both deceased and left him their old Airstream trailer. He remained there despite having a fair amount of wealth at his disposal. His proposal to his one and only girlfriend had been turned down. He was profoundly sad but still kind. He worked trying to find new information about the science of pheromones. He lived alone until he died and cried when he watched movies about happy families. He ate TV dinners from the microwave every night, not because he couldn't afford better food, but because his parents had eaten them, and he remained glued to their habits. He inhabited a lonely space and had a giant scar all the way across his face. From a fence wire his retired Army general father had pushed him into. He never grew out of wanting his parents' approval. He was rich, but very frugal. He had an odd ritual of trying to dismantle clocks and make them move backwards. It was simply his way of trying to reverse time. He had piercing blue eyes. I cried as I lifted my head from Ginger's chest. It's okay, he assured me. I knew it would not be the best or happiest of stories. I told him, no, it was really rather gory and deeply unfortunate. It hit him in his emotions, I could tell. I called his heart the scent scientist. I explained the kindness in him, but the grim life he had endured. Ginger seemed to already know this man down to his core. Well, it certainly makes a great deal of sense, he said, very quickly starting to unbutton his shirt. Unsure of his motivation, I squirmed a bit. What are you doing there, Ginger? I asked. Oh, sorry. I'm told that I'm somewhat unaware of acceptable transitions in behavior. I wanted to show you why I walk backwards, and also the reason I'm quite sure my heart character chooses to dissect clocks in an attempt to reverse time. He then further blew my mind by revealing the absolute most intense and prominent scar I have thus far ever seen. The whole thing was like a trippy dream. It was like a thick seam, this scar. It went from between his collarbones all the way down below his belly button. "What on earth happened to you?" I asked, gasping. "You see, when I was a baby," he told me, "I was born with my heart beating backwards. The valves went the wrong way. Everything was flipped and not at all as it should be, for functionality. So they had to slice me open like a tin can, see, and to come up with a real quick plan to make it beat properly. I still feel it quite painfully sometimes. But I find walking backwards makes it hurt less. Like maybe some people think I'm a mess, but I think I'm blessed somehow with this strangeness, if that makes any sense." "Yes, it does, friend," I told him, trying to comprehend such trauma. We returned to the group and all the collective drama. The following evening, I was flirting with a rockabilly type. I have always had a bit of a thing for those rockabilly boys. I was really enjoying our chat when I felt a presence at my back. Within a second flat, Ginger was on me, planting the strangest and most unexpected kiss of my whole life upon my lips. I about flipped. It was so abrupt and jarring. I didn't want to go scarring the guy, but I could not deny how awkward and unwanted it was. I had to just step away instead of jumping to boxing gloves, because in his mind it may have been an act of love, but to me, he shoved his lips onto mine while I was having a nice time with another guy. I know that our connection was a high for both of us, but that wasn't the boat I was ready to jump on with him. My friend took him aside and explained why I wasn't ready for a move like that. He didn't really react, but I think he understood. I got to a good place with him before we hit the road. But I wish that rare glow hadn't been interrupted by such a human "whoa, what?" moment. But he owned it, saying that no one had acknowledged him that much in years, and I still get tears in my eyes to think of it. But that's not even the craziest bit. Years later, when MySpace was still a thing, I went to a gathering of many of the same faces that had been on that tour. A beautiful friend and I were wearing the exact same color scheme, and not just like red and black. We're talking like I was taken aback. We were a scene right out of Dr. Seuss, both sporting bright yellow tights and very dramatic hunter green boots. She had on gold hoop earrings, and I don't have pierced ears, but wore a big gold hoop bracelet. To complete the look, we both had on long, flowy purple dresses. The message to me was, go give her love first and start the evening investigating the meaning of this vibrant coincidence. It was evident straight away that we were meant to talk that day. You are never going to believe who the band got a message from on MySpace. Her face was illuminated by the excitement of it. "Oh shit," I said. "Who? Tell me." "Ginger." Awe and disbelief shot like electricity from her words into my toes and straight up through my fingers. "No," I said, although I already believed it. "What did he say?" "Teal, oh my gosh, this shit is crazy," she told me. "He said, 'Please apologize to that woman Teal for me.' I immediately thought he was referencing the kiss." My friend continued. He said, "I do not wish to create any doubt in her about her magical abilities. One should never lie to a soothsayer in such a way." To this day, I'm so delighted that he referred to me with that term. I squirmed with anticipation. She went on. He said, "Please tell her that I did sleep with that older woman neighbor. Tell her, please, that I was just ashamed. I knew that she was a real holder of magic, so I don't know why it surprised me, but I couldn't believe she knew. But it's true. I had never told a soul, and I think I convinced myself that it didn't happen. But it did. I don't want her to question her strength of vision. I made the hasty decision to lie to her. Please be sure to tell her that was wrong of me, and she was completely correct. Thank you." This blew me sideways. "Did you just say what I think you said?" I asked my friend, shaking my head in disbelief. "Yes, my sweet," she laughed. "That happened. Craziest saga ever." And it was. And it still makes my whole soul buzz to think on it. And it got crazier still. One of my best friends, who will forever be with me, but not tangibly because he chose to take himself out of this reality, came into the restaurant where I worked, and what I didn't realize at the time would be the last instance I'd glimpse him alive. And as soon as I sat down to bask in his beauty, he said, "You are never going to believe who I ran into in Idaho." He and I were usually very psychically connected, but I couldn't select it, scanning his thoughts. "Who? Tell me," I said eagerly. "Ginger," he said. And I just remembered that he never even met him. He just knew the story and the description, and it was him. He wasn't even there. Yeah. He just knew the story because it was iconic. Anyway, just remember that. He never met Ginger, but he knew who he was and approached him and said, "Are you the Ginger?" And it was him. In Idaho. Ginger, he said. That was the clincher. The person who most recognized and jived with my form of magic, intuition, was randomly in the cosmic position to run into the only living heart character I'd ever met, in a place that I have yet to go that he'd never been to. Like, wow. Look at you go, universe. You sure have a way of pulling out surprises, I must say. And that's the last I heard of Ginger. This was before you could look anyone up with a few swipes of your finger. I hope he's crossed the country backwards. I hope he's moved forward, too. I hope he's seen new sights and hasn't had to fight too hard to be seen for the standout ball of stardust that he is. He's likely still wandering, but heck, maybe he has a wife and kids. I think I did 15 or 20 other readings on that mystical trip. No one can compare to the mental flips I did to find Ginger, a real living person. But I am certain that all those who received these readings benefited and connected deeply to the people I found living in their chests. It's hard to choose the best among them. Some readings have been with friends, some with total strangers. Some of the characters I found were beautiful, some dangerous, some wild, some who should have been famous. There was the nudist conductor, the conspiracy theorist professor, the very, very scary peacock butcher, the big city warrior, the strong black farmer with one arm, the warm-eyed buxom Swede, the queen of mirrors, the joyful beet grower, the mystic pitcher, the jilted quilter, the Finnish mitten maker. That one deserves its own long chapter. The bridge builder, the brave Sir Captain Poetry, a female with quite a title indeed, who dreams only in fast-forward speed. The wannabe housewife. The unicyclist was quite the sight. I read someone who had been struck by lightning twice. His was the solemn scribe. There was the deep-sea diver, then the hermit war vet, a strong survivor, the shifter, the rambler, a.k.a. wandering boy, a.k.a. one who had my heart, he himself a bit of a drifter. The oversexed matador, a perfect match, to be sure. Such a pure energy in the tire swing firecracker, the weaver, the Mayan healer, the crafty cobbler, the lion tamer, the gray-haired gypsy, the eastern pixie, the dark saw saint who made me dizzy, the secret sage who carved her own way, the limping hero who saved the day, the tomboy mermaid who worked with clay, the curvy Samoan with the soothing face, the rocker harp angel whose human host lived for the chase. No one could keep pace with the salty dog. Someone who could stand on and split logs was the sensitive lumberjack. And one whose impact sticks with me and inspired a song written beautifully by his host, possessing the most captivating eyes, also the only one I visited twice, was the mathematician. There was much hidden within the walls of the secretive painter. There was the unexpected aerobics Barbie personal trainer, the beautiful woman inside a sturdy chest who couldn't contain her passion for drawing, the jaw-dropping Latina superhero, the slow-dancing, waltzing romantic, the intriguing yet frantic white-haired director, the sturdy ballerina dancing through her pain, and one even my wild brain couldn't have created, the very unexpected cross-dressing cartoonist. I was captivated by the capers of the eccentric balloonist. The list goes on and on. I wish I had drawn pictures of all of them. Some hearts I read I was sure would forever be my friends. But life tends to surprise us, doesn't it? I'm a bit rusty. It's been a minute since I gave that part of me. The heart of me, the bricklayer, working patiently. I guess he's been afraid he gave too much at times. I think my mind and soul will roll back into it naturally, that heart-scanning capacity. Every single one of these characters captivated me. They've stayed with me. As they exist in their hosts' heartbeats, a part of all of them are woven into my reality. I'm lucky that I discovered this ability. Finding them all filled me with beautiful stories. Hopefully, I'll meet more hearts to explore when I have just a bit more energy. Oh, revisitation.
Wow.
I just,
Amazing,
I just miss so many of these people. I thought that I would always be around these profound connections. I never thought there was any chance, not even a slight one really, that so many of us would distantly drift. But life shifts that way. So I wore this in one other video that was kind of a sad video, and bringing it out for this one, which is more of an uplifting one. Really do miss doing the heart readings, but this was someone in our band of merry pranksters. Mama Snail. She made this for me by hand, and it's this beautiful crow holding all this treasure, and it just meant so much to me that she told me that crows are like these fiercely loyal, smart creatures, and they love shiny things, and if you give them gifts, they'll like do favors for you. And for whatever reason, that just struck her as an image for me, and her and my friend Midas made this together with me in mind. And so this crow has all these profound treasures in tow. This is a silver sand dollar and an ankh, and it has like a chain coming out of it. I mean, it's insanely intricate and beautiful. And then the crow is just shielding his beautiful little heart right under there. So not a lot of gifts can compare to something that magical. And there's hearts in there. It just sucks because there's people who are so important to me, and I can't remember which one their heart was. And I've written down this whole list, and I'm like, whose was that? And some of these people are no longer on Earth. And so the memory of the person I found inside their heart seems even more profound, and I just wish I had the energy to track it all down, and figure out all these mysteries. I remember one on that road trip was a random guy that was at one of the concerts, and I don't remember exactly who the character was, but he had all of these fish that he had named with bee names. So this huge collection of fish that were like bamboo, bonsai, bunny, bubbles, and I told this to this guy, and his jaw was just on the floor, and he was like, I used to have like gerbils and hamsters and rats and mice, and I named them all with bee names. And I was like, what? No, you didn't. No way. Didn't know this guy. Never met the guy. Did it in a parking lot. And there was everyone just had such a profound connection. The guy who got struck by lightning twice, his was like this Renaissance era scribe, and he was everything I described. His eyes were just like bulging out of his head, and he was like, I have dreamed of this guy, this writer, this professional scribe to the palace. I have dreamed about this guy my whole life, everything that I had been describing. So who knows? I don't know where it all comes from. And it's kind of like my swipe poetry. Like, I wish I could take credit for it and say, oh yeah, just totally came up with that right here off the top of my noggin. but I don't know, I think I would be a better writer if I could just make stuff like this up, but I found it all. But yeah, they all had these really intense connections. One of them, I think I maybe called it. Yeah, that's right. I effed it up because it wasn't baseball. It's all coming back to me. Like, I haven't thought about so many of these characters in so long, and this is someone I haven't talked to in holy heavens 10 or 11 years. But I called it the Mystic Pitcher to make it rhyme, but it was actually called the Mystic Hitter, and it wasn't baseball. It was tennis, and this person whose heart they lived in had like a great grandfather who was like a famous tennis player. No idea, no clue, not one, not a single clue about that. But yeah, there was always something like that, like, I've had a vision of that, or I've dreamed of that, or that was my great grandfather, I think. Or so that's my best theory on it, is that it's a past life that really stuck with you, made a huge impact. I can't prove that as a fact. How could I ever do that? It would be impossible. But so that was a really important one. I've been meaning to write that for, obviously years now, years and years. So it's been a heavy day with a lot of tears, but I'm glad that I pulled that one off. So speaking of off, I'm off to go relax after a insanely impactful day. And thank you for hearing all that I've had to say and being with me this whole dang way. Come here, you scoundrel. Come on. He's like, I just want to be in the video. I've been patient this whole time at your feet. It's me, Gizmo, the actual star of the show. Everybody knows it. It's Gizmo's channel. Hi, everyone. He probably would get more views than me if it was just the Gizmo show. It's probably what I should do next. So, thank you. Thank you for letting me dive and reflect and jive and select pieces of my heart and my memory to share with you all. So, I'm gonna ball when it's all over. I can just guarantee that even though I'm gonna keep going in some capacity, when we reach the summit of this 365 wild ride, some tears are gonna be sliding down my face. So, okay. Thank you so much for being with me, and see you tomorrow. We're almost there.